When we live with MS, there can be dozens of symptoms, and they can really interfere with our lives, our ability to work, and our quality of life. I've been living with MS since at least 2006. In today's video, I'm going to go over 5 common symptoms of MS that I have and some evidence-based tips to help us manage our symptoms and improve our quality of life. Sound good? First, I'll go over the symptoms and then talk about the tips, because some of the tips can be helpful to multiple symptoms. One of the most negatively impactful symptoms of MS is fatigue. In fact, it's been cited as the most common symptom associated with the decision to leave work or reduce employment, and it can lead to worsening of other MS symptoms. Oh, and any papers or studies that I cite in the video will be linked in the description below, and I'm also going to create a free handout of the tips that you can download too. When I have fatigue, it can feel like I'm completely drained. Even going up the stairs can feel like an insurmountable task, or getting off the couch can take a huge amount of effort. My fatigue tends to hit me in mid to late afternoons, and there are some things that I noticed in hindsight that trigger my fatigue. My triggers are stress, lack of sleep, illness, heat, and dehydration. Some other triggers of fatigue may be physical activity or lack thereof, muscle spasms, and poor diet. There are a couple of kinds of fatigues with MS. There's primary fatigue and secondary fatigue. Primary fatigue is thought to be due to nerve messages from our brain and spinal cord having to navigate around areas of damage caused by our MS. So it takes more energy to send and deliver messages to other parts of the body. Secondary fatigue is caused by the effect of living with MS. For instance, MS symptoms such as depression, being in pain, or having our sleep disturbed by spasms, or needing to get up to go to the bathroom can all make fatigue worse. The one that surprised me the most was spasms. When we have spasms, it can take a lot more energy to move our muscles to overcome the spasms and the stiffness. The spasms can also interfere with our sleep, adding to the fatigue. The next common symptom is heat intolerance, or Uhthoff's phenomenon, also called Uhthoff's sign or Uhthoff's syndrome, and it affects 60 to 80% of people with MS. When our core temperature increases, even just a little bit, we can get a temporary increase in our neurological symptoms. Some of the things that may make this happen are when we exercise and increase our body temperature, when we're outside for an extended period of time on hot days, illness with a fever, a hot shower or bath, or sitting in a hot tub. They actually used to use the hot bath test as part of the diagnostic criteria for MS for many decades. They would put people with suspected MS into a hot bath to see if their neurological symptoms got worse. They actually did this up to the early 1980s. Can you imagine being subjected to this? I'm curious, have any of my viewers had this test? Let me know in the comments below. When I get overheated, I can get an increased tightness in my left leg, spasms on the left, and I get this blister feeling on the bottom of my foot, especially when I exercise. It can also increase my fatigue and my cog fog. And speaking of cog fog, that's the next symptom. Cog fog, or cognitive fog, is when we have trouble with thinking, like finding the right words, forgetting work tasks, or home routines, or appointments. It may take us longer to solve problems, or we may lose our train of thought mid-sentence. This one, for me, goes hand in hand with fatigue or stress. When I'm tired or stressed, I have a harder time cognitively. I also have a hard time processing when I'm in noisy situations. If I'm at a gathering with a lot of people and they're all talking and maybe there's music playing and perhaps a kitchen fan running, I have a really hard time. Does this ever happen to you? Or do you have other triggers of cog fog? Let me know in the comments. The next common symptom that I have is spasms. My left leg is prone to them. Sometimes it'll be similar to a Charlie horse, but most times it's more subtle. It's a tightness in my thigh. It can feel like my skin is too tight. It actually took me some time to figure out that this tightness in my thigh was keeping me from sleeping well. I just couldn't get comfortable in my bed. My neurologist is the one that helped me to realize this. It sometimes feels like the MS hug, but around my thigh. Like many of my symptoms, it's affected by heat, stress, and fatigue. It is also triggered by sitting too long, especially if I'm sitting in a high top or on a bar stool type chair, or in a chair where my feet don't reach the floor, which is most chairs because I'm only 4'10". Weakness is another one of my common MS symptoms. Both my left arm and my left leg have some weakness. It's particularly evident with those triggers of heat and stress and illness. I recently had a pseudo relapse and it really affected my strength. And I made a video about it and I'll link it above and I'll put it in the description below if you'd like to check it out. When my weakness flares, it's so frustrating. It affects how I move and my day-to-day activities. It slows me down and I get so frustrated. Do you get frustrated with symptom flares too? Fatigue, Uhthoff's phenomenon, cog fog, spasms, and weakness. They're all really common to MS, but there's good news. There are things that we can do to help with all of these symptoms. There's been a lot of research in the past few years on diet and several studies showing that eating a more whole food plant-based diet is effective at reducing fatigue and increasing quality of life. So be sure to eat your fruits and vegetables. It's particularly important to reduce highly processed foods and food-like products and reduce saturated fats. Dr. Roy Swank did a decades-long research and it concluded that dietary fats play a major part in development and progression of MS. His work has shown that dramatically reducing the intake of saturated fats from all sources can have a great effect on MS. Exercising also reduces fatigue. I know, it sounds counterintuitive, but if we exercise regularly to keep our bodies strong and flexible, we have less fatigue. Exercise should be considered an effective fatigue management strategy. What kind of exercise? The exercise that we'll do. Consistently moving our bodies is key. There is some research that shows resistance training to be a bit more effective in helping to reduce fatigue. Exercising can also reduce spasticity, especially stretching. I know that when I stretch regularly twice a day, I have less spasms and less spasticity. Getting proper sleep can help a lot as well. If we're not getting good sleep, our bodies don't rest and repair at night. Poor sleep might make some of our MS symptoms feel worse, including fatigue, pain, and memory and thinking. I try to aim for 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night. I also take muscle relaxers at night to help with the tightness so I can sleep better. I find getting good sleep can help with fatigue, cog fog, weakness, and lots of other symptoms for me. There are things that we can do to help with Uhthoff's phenomenon too. Getting overheated can zap our energy fast and cause many of our symptoms to flare. I try to avoid hot showers. I've recently started adding a blast of cold water to the end of my showers and I find it quite invigorating. I used to get out of the shower and feel completely drained, like I'd have to sit or lay down on the bed for a bit to recover. Now I take more tepid showers and I finish with a few seconds of cold water to help cool down my body. I also use a cooling vest and I sip ice water when I'm exercising. I find this helps to keep my core temperature down, particularly the ice water. And I also make sure to pre-hydrate. Dehydration can lead to increased symptoms too. Swimming is a great way to get exercise without overheating too. The water helps to keep us cool while we burn calories. It's also a lot easier for some with MS to exercise in the pool because the water can help us with buoyancy and it gently pushes back on us, so we're less likely to lose our balance. In the summer, I avoid going out if it's too hot. If I need to be out in the heat, I seek the shade, and I also can use my neck fan or a cooling neck wrap to keep me cool. I'll put links in the description to these if you would like to check them out. There are things that we can do to help manage our MS symptoms. Eating the most nutritious foods we can find, avoiding high saturated fat foods, and avoiding highly processed foods. Exercising as we're able to keep our bodies strong and flexible, getting good sleep to give our bodies time to rest and repair, keeping cool whenever we can, especially when we exercise and during the warmer months. To get your free handout with these tips, see the link below. Thanks for joining me today. To see more on living well with MS, watch these videos next. Until next time, be well.